If you are a frequent visitor to the African continent or live there and happen to travel across the continent often, chances are that your airline of choice is Ethiopian Airline. It is the market leader in the continent and accounts for nearly 9% share of total seat capacity. As at the time of making this video, the airline is more than 50% larger based on seat capacity than Egypt Air, Royal Air Maroc, and South African Airways. But how did Ethiopian become the most dominant airline in Africa, carrying over 10 million passengers with $3 billion in revenue and over $2 million in profits in 2018? In this video, we will go back to the end of the Second World War to see the genesis of this iconic and one of the most prestigious airline brands in the world. The year is 1946, and while most of Africa is still under colonial rule, aviation would have been considered an alien industry for Ethiopia, a poor African country totally reliant on subsistence agriculture with an illiteracy rate of more than 96%. When Ethiopian Airlines was first established, Ethiopia had only 2 secondary schools and no tertiary institution. Right after the Second World War, Ethiopia was the only independent African sovereign state and a founding member of the United Nations. As part of a modernization initiative, the Ethiopian government committed to establish a commercial airline to integrate the country politically and economically. This was seen as the most rational and cost-effective strategy because of the rugged and mountainous terrain coupled with inadequate roads and railways in the country at the time. With the assistance of Swedish Count Erik von Rosen, who had built the Air Force for Emperor Haile Selassie, the Ethiopian government initially approached the Swedish carrier ABA, and an agreement was due to be signed on December 1945. However, in June, the Ethiopian delegation attending the United Nations Founding Conference in New York met with the US State Department representatives and requested technical assistance in establishing a commercial airline primarily for domestic air services. The State Department organized an initial meeting with Brigadier General T.B. Wilson, board chairman of Transcontinental and Western Airlines (CWA), which would later be renamed as Transworld Airlines in 1950. Ethiopian government signed an agreement with TWA in September 1945, and the airline was founded on 21st December the same year and commenced operation on 8th of April 1946 with an aircraft fleet of 5 Douglas DC-3 war surplus aircrafts that had a proven record of operating in rugged terrain and difficult conditions, as Ethiopia had no runways at the time. The airline's first route was a weekly service between Addis Ababa and Cairo in Egypt. The fleet was then expanded with a dozen new aircraft which were capable of regional and international flights and could handle more passengers. The airline started long-haul services to Frankfurt in the then West Germany in 1958 and inaugurated its first jet service in January 1963 from Addis Ababa to Nairobi, Kenya. In 1962, after completion of the new Bole International Airport, Ethiopian Airlines became the first African airline to incorporate Boeing 720B jets on its fleet. Following the agreement between Transworld Airlines and Ethiopian Airlines, Transworld Airlines became responsible for selecting and procuring all aircraft and the equipment needed to start an aviation industry. It provided advisory services for all training and technical facilities established in Ethiopia. For its services, Transworld Airlines was paid a management fee. It was also offered a minority equity share but never took it up. From the outset, it was understood that Transworld Airlines would transfer knowledge and build local capacity so that Ethiopians would gradually take over posts held by foreign, mostly American staff. The Ethiopianization policy was formalized in the second agreement in 1953. The third agreement in 1959 reinforced the localization of expertise, while the fourth in 1966 marked a major milestone, transferring management and appointing as a deputy CEO Semret Medane, who would become the first Ethiopian CEO in November 1971. The fifth agreement in 1970 articulated the shift of Transworld Airlines' role from managing to advising, and the partnership eventually ended in 1975 when Transworld Airlines found the venture less attractive. Between 1972 and 1975, Ethiopian Airlines had already begun the transition to Ethiopian executives and personnel, and after the partnership with Transworld Airline was officially terminated in 1975, Ethiopian Airlines was managed and operated by Ethiopians. The first major challenge for the airline was the dramatic political instability created by two regime changes. Following the toppling of Emperor Haile Selassie on February 1974 by a totalitarian military regime led by Mengistu Haile Mariam. The new regime's socialist economic doctrine was a major obstacle for Ethiopian Airlines. Government officials would intervene in the airline's internal corporate affairs, dismissing Semret Medane and appointing a military general as chief executive officer solely on political grounds. The regime then instructed Ethiopian Airlines to cease purchasing of American aircraft and to purchase them only from Russia. This would be a major policy shift for an airline that had built its capabilities and management style on the basis of a partnership with a US airline and Boeing, a US aircraft supplier. Following the order, what happened next was a clear testimony to Ethiopian Airlines' maturity and emergence as an economically crucial industry. The airline's management threatened collective resignation, forcing the government to reverse its decision. Subsequently, the airline introduced Boeing 767s, opening new opportunities for non-stop, long-distance flights of up to 13 hours across the Atlantic, and then replaced its Boeing B720s with Boeing 737s. This constant interference from the government affected Ethiopian Airlines' performance, staff discipline, and conformity with industry practices, which later led to major financial losses that brought Ethiopian Airlines close to bankruptcy. Under pressure from the airline management, government officials eventually agreed to appoint someone who understood the industry as the chief executive officer. Captain Mohammed, an aviation veteran, accepted the post in 1980 on condition that state intervention in internal matters would stop and that the airline would operate under international business practices rather than socialist doctrines. The regime accepted the conditions and the new CEO was able to turn around the nearly bankrupt airline. The collapse of Haile Mengistu's regime in 1991 gave rise to another period of tension and uncertainty. Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front approached the capital Addis Ababa, practically placing it under siege. Ethiopian Airline management decided to protect and save the assets of the company from damage and destruction. In May 1991, the management unilaterally decided to move all Ethiopian Airline aircraft to Nairobi, Kenya, negotiating with the Kenyan Aviation Authority to operate and service Ethiopian Airlines customers from Nairobi until the political tension in Ethiopia abated. The 1990s were thus a period of transition, confusion, and policy experimentation, and the government's delay in resolving the situation caused unwarranted setbacks in Ethiopian Airlines recovery, growth, and expansion. It is at the beginning of the new millennium that Ethiopian Airlines started showing signs of growth. This happened when two Ethiopian Airlines veterans, Girma Wake and Tewolde Gebremariam, returned. Wake from Gafea to become the CEO and Gebremariam from New York to become Deputy CEO. This appointment of highly experienced insiders began to turn the fortunes of Ethiopian Airlines, from managing crises to pursuing growth and upgrading capabilities. With Ethiopian Airlines survival threatened by the increasingly competitive market environment, a new board and management team unanimously decided to develop a fundamental new vision and long-term plan for rapid growth. Vision 2010, a 5-year plan for 2006 to 2010, and Vision 2025, a 15-year plan for 2011 to 2025, laid out a fundamentally new trajectory for the company. The airline surpassed its Vision 2010 target with high financial performance and considerable market expansion. For example, within 5 years, Ethiopian Airlines fleet had increased by 60% to 41 commercial aircraft. Its annual passenger capacity had doubled to 3.2 million passengers and its cargo volume had tripled. By 2015, Ethiopian Airlines had become the largest African airline. In 2018, it transported more than 12 million passengers, a fourfold increase since 2010, and 500,000 tons of cargo, and had increased its fleet to more than 100 new generation aircrafts, a threefold increase since 2010. Its network widened to 115 international destinations, including Los Angeles in the United States and Tokyo in Japan. Its China-African routes alone are expected to carry 1 million passengers in 2018, making Ethiopian Airlines the major airline linking Africa with China. This rapid overall expansion has made Ethiopian Airlines the most profitable aviation company in Africa, while other African airlines including Egypt, Kenya Airways, and South African Airways continue to struggle for survival. For Ethiopia, Ethiopian Airlines has become the largest single generator of export earnings and accounts for 4% of the GDP. It has also directly or indirectly created employment to over 50,000 people.